Welcome to another episode of the Brett Snodgrass podcast. I am Brett Snodgrass, the host of this show, and I got a great guest, Mr. Chris Arnold, on today's podcast episode. But what I want you to do right now is go to YouTube and subscribe to the Brett Snodgrass channel. Also, click that little bell so you get notifications every single week. We got videos coming out right to your inbox. Thank you guys so much. Chris Arnold. Chris Arnold is the founder of the Multipliers Mastermind group. He's also the founder of COSA Investments and Arnold Elite Realty, and he holds a master's degree in theology. And while he's been extremely successful in real estate, he's always viewed it as a vehicle to impact other people's lives. Chris and I go really deep on this particular episode. We talk about men and the struggles of what entrepreneurial men deal with, how isolated they are. What are some of the deepest and darkest secrets of entrepreneurial men? And we share it all with vulnerability. I want to introduce you guys to today's podcast guest, Mr. Chris Arnold. What's going on, brother?
What's up, buddy? Hanging out with you. You know it's going to be a good time. I really appreciate you having me on, man.
That's right. I love the office, the rustic look. You're so clean cut, and then you got the rustic farmhouse type of look. It's awesome, man. Love it.
That's what I'm going for. I'm going for farmhouse look in Tulum. How about that for a contradiction?
No, man, it's awesome. It's such a pleasure to hang out with you today, Chris. Always look up to you, admire you. You inspire me to grow each and every day, just like you do entrepreneurs all across the nation. And I know that that's just a passion of yours to work with men like myself. And that's why you created the mastermind group called the Multipliers, which I've been a part of. You've also have an amazing real estate investment company, COSA Investments, Arnold Elite Realty. And you have some news coming up recently. Just purchased a coaching type of platform, Wholesaling Inc. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really incredible opportunity of an acquisition. So I've been a coach on that platform for about a year. So really got to connect well with Tom Kroll. If you know Tom, man, that guy just has one of the greatest hearts of any men that you'll meet. So one of the things that always drew me to Tom was he was in it because his primary aim was to love people, not sell people. And so there was a transition time where he approached me and said, "Hey, I'm ready to transition out of this business." And so offered me the opportunity to take the baton and keep going. And so as I sized it up, as I look at any opportunity, there's a couple of things that I look for. I want to know that it's a delivery system that drives impact. I think that's a really important piece. Also want to know that it's a delivery system that allows me to be more of me. So if I can step into an organization and not have to shift who I am, but it actually pulls out more of what's in my heart, that's always a really important piece as well. And I believe business is a conduit for personal growth. So if I can get into something that is new, that's going to challenge me, that's what I love business. I think it's one of the great transformers out there that we can be a part of. It'll drive you to your knees, but in that process, it'll teach you a lot as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, congrats on that. I know Tom as well. Great guy. Love his heart as well. Always love his shirts too. When I'm watching videos of Tom, he always wearing like a Hawaiian shirt or something, which is really cool. Putting his personality out there.
He's a Floridian, man.
Yes.
Tommy Bahama, baby.
Definitely. Well, congrats on that. Guys, if you're checking out, go check out Wholesaling Inc. with Chris and check out his team over there. They're amazing people. So check that out if you're interested in wholesaling. Chris, reason why I want to have you on this show, number one, is you're an amazing guy. You've been a real estate investor for many years now, but when I think of you, I think of people. You've already mentioned this a couple times already. You want to impact people. Whatever business you do has to be a people business. And with that, you want to make the most impact you can on that group of people. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. Like, has this been kind of a transition in the recent years that you've kind of transitioned to? Because I know, for the last 10 plus years, you were really into the wholesaling business. You moved out to Tulum, but talk to us about Chris Arnold as a person and like what really drives you.
Yeah. So I think you have to step back a little bit on my story. I'll pick it up maybe around high school time, age 16, 17 years old. And I was rebellious as can be. I find this to be a common thread with most entrepreneurs. We tend to be rebellious. We tend to challenge the process. And when we're younger, we really haven't funneled that in the right direction. A lot of times it's funneled in a direction that it shouldn't be. And so I remember age 17, I got arrested with possession of drugs. And I was going to court and they're like, hey, my attorney was like, we got to send him somewhere because when he shows back up to court, we need to show some proof that, he's been in some type of rehabilitation process. So my parents, I mean, this is just a crazy story. They picked this place called Project Peace on Earth. It was owned by these hippies, like this hippie couple. So, I mean, he literally had like long hair, like the Apostle Paul, like Jesus. I mean, looked just the part, right? Short, fiery guy. And she was like the total hippie. She wore bell bottoms. There were peacocks on the farm. She wrote poetry and painted on everything. And I was like, I mean, if I got to go somewhere at age 17, and go through some process, I was like, this is much better than some kind of formal institution. So I went out there, really no desire to change. That was actually not rock bottom for me. Believe it or not, it would have taken a lot more to break me. But I had an incredible transformation out there. It was about 2 months into the process. And I woke up one day and, man, I wish sometimes I go back to kind of try to explain what happened, but I can just tell you that the blinders were lifted. And I knew at that moment, as I was kind of looking at the trajectory of my life and where I was headed, at age 17, when we're not very mature, we don't have much perspective on that. But literally within that time frame, God stepped into my life and delivered me from all the drugs, everything that I was in. And at that point, Brett, I knew like what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I wanted to spend the rest of my life in the service of people and helping people. I just had no idea what that was going to look like looking forward. And so you asked me a question, did I start out that way? It started as a vision, but it knew it was going to take some time before I could get to a place where I had built up a business and a platform and really earned the right to speak into people's lives. And I actually put a time frame on it. I said 10 years. I said, I'll put my head down for 10 years. I will use this thing called real estate as a vehicle. It's going to give me freedom of time. It's going to give me freedom of resources. But I got to focus on me. I've got to learn to lead myself. And I've got to really answer the question, do I have what it takes? And I'm going to have a family and I'm going to need to make sure that that's in place and that's being taken care of. And then I've earned the right to kind of look outside myself. And so I put a 10-year deadline. And honestly, when that 10 years hit, that's when I flipped that switch and I said, you know what? First 10 years was focused on success. The rest of my life now is going to be focused on significance.
I love it. I love it. And which actually was very, very interesting is you hold a master's degree in theology. So you had this radical experience and coming to Jesus moment. And then you went and got a degree in that as well.
I mean, that's what I was gonna say. At that point, I didn't know what to do. It's like I was 17 years old and it's like, well, what should I do? I was like, well, I guess I'll go to Bible school. I mean, that's just like, there's a conventional process that you start with, right? It's kind of like, well, what do you do? I guess I'll go there. I guess I'll go get a master's degree. But what was funny as I went down that conventional path, even though I needed to be on that conventional path for a small period of time, the challenging part for me was I began to realize I was very unconventional. Like by the time I began to finish my degree in theology, like I was crystal clear, like I am not going to go be a pastor of a church. I'm not going to be a missionary, although I did that. I lived in Uganda and did mission work. So I honestly had a really difficult time of being confused because all of my friends knew exactly how they wanted to plug into church world. And I'm like, I think that's the last place that I want to be. Like I'm too raw. I'm probably a little bit too much of a challenging the process person. Mm-hmm. And I think for those of us as entrepreneurs, if we kind of push the boundaries on things, maybe, so I always say, I think we're the right amount of wrong. if that makes sense. You're not afraid to crack open a beer, or, maybe sometimes you drop a cuss word, whatever that looks like. That just doesn't work in church world. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I go into church world, I'm going to die, because there is a part of me that tends to be a little bit edgy. And so I really had some confusion during that time. And so when I finished seminary, what I did was I went and traveled the world for 6 months. Like, I put a backpack on. I went to like 8 or 9 countries to try to like find myself and figure out what in the world I wanted to do with my life. So I wish I could say it was like this clear path of what I wanted to do. But really the moment for me was when I was at Chick-fil-A eating a chicken biscuit and really confused about my life. And, they say you go to seminary for 2 years, it takes you another 10 years to actually get over it. And so with that, I was sitting there and I was looking up on the mural, looking about how Kathy Truitt had built Chick-fil-A and utilized a for-profit business to impact the world. Like, you could see how he was given to college funds and how they were doing building projects like Habitat for Humanity type stuff. And that was the first moment I was like, I don't think I'm called to church world. Like, I think I'm called to utilize this thing called business as a vehicle to create impact, because I had a lot of friends that had what I would call a lot of purpose, but they never had the profit to back that purpose. So they were still like sitting in alumni housing from when we graduated, waiting for God to like magically fill their bank account. And for me, it was like, hey, that's one route you can go. You can create a nonprofit. You can go around and move the hearts of people by whatever your vision is. And you can, build something off of raised money. That's just not my personality. I felt like God was saying, I want you to build a for-profit business, and I want you to be able to write the check for whatever it is that I've called you to do. And that was a major shift, literally at Chick-fil-A.
Wow. Yeah, it never fails, man. There's so many, God come to Jesus moments at Chick-fil-A. So eating that chicken biscuit, that's awesome. But you're exactly right, Chris. I surround myself.
Hey, Brett, let me pause you real quick.
Yeah.
Can you hear the dog? I happen to be dog sitting, which I never do. Can you hear barking?
I can hear it a little bit. Yeah.
Is it going to be in the deal? Because so I'm going to move the dog like next door.
It might help a little.
Yeah, let me go to my friend. I'm so sorry.
No, you're all good.
I just happen to be dog sitting for my friend in Colombia. I don't like dogs, don't have dogs, but
a few moments later.
Sorry about that, brother.
No, it's all good, man. It's all good. I get it.
Hold on, let me turn this off too real quick. My house is usually so quiet, and then my friend was like, "Can you dog watch for me?" And I'm like, yes, I'll dog watch. And then of course it barks.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
I moved in next door to my neighbor's house. So.
All right. Sounds good.
I remember where we left off. We left off on Chick-fil-A. So I'm good.
Yeah, I'll pick it up. So,
cool.
No, you're exactly right, Chris. I mean, I surround myself a lot with church-going people and people that do missions trips, but they don't have any money most of the time. And I get an email sometimes, people, they're getting ready to go on a mission trip, which I'm really into going on mission trips, helping, serving people. And Guatemala is typically where I go. I build houses, things like that. But a lot of times people have to raise money. Like, they're going on this mission trip. They got to raise this money to go. And guys that own their own businesses, entrepreneurs, I mean, we don't have to do that. It's so refreshing. It gives us those options to be able to help and impact others and not have to have this money thing stop us from doing these things that we're called to.
I totally agree. I think I have come to discover that there's kind of two camps of people. You have entrepreneurs that have profit, but they have no purpose. And I find them to be pretty empty. They tend to kind of lack fulfillment in their life. And then on the other side, I see people that have purpose but no profit. And what I see over there is frustration and discouragement because they have something deep in their heart they want to accomplish. And so I believe that there's power via business to combine both profit and purpose. I think when those two things collide, what you get, to put language to it, is social entrepreneurship. It is the concept of using a for-profit business with a cause base in which you're utilizing and building the business, not so that you can, have more money and buy bigger toys, but you're utilizing that profit and building that business under the understanding that you're building it to create profit, to take it and to do something that you're passionate about with it. And so if you were to ask me, one of the things that I'm really interested in is I want to continue to kind of spread that message and continue to raise up more social entrepreneurs. Because again, on the left side, you got the guys with the Lambos and the Rollies, and they got all the profit, but like there is no purpose in their life. Mm-hmm. And then as you talked about, you have people in church world that they're just so frustrated because they want to go accomplish something, but they don't have any money to be able to do it. And so I think that is the power of business if it's used effectively by combining both profit and purpose together.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to kind of transition because you talk about social entrepreneurship and using profit and purpose and using them together. And one of the things that you've done is created a mastermind, or you call it a brotherhood, called the Multipliers. And this is a group of men. And you've been doing this for, 3 or 4 years now, and you've really focused on business owners that are men. And this is such a different type of mastermind group because we both have been in other mastermind groups, and typically you get a hotel, you meet in a hotel conference room, a lot of people in one setting, and there's a 2-day, 3-day thing with video screens, and it's not super intimate. You hear some speakers kind of coming in and going, and you're just meeting a bunch of different people at random times, and you can't quite get a handle on anything for that amount of time. And you've decided to create this mastermind group called the Multipliers, and this focused only on men, number one. So why did you choose to focus only on men in this group, and why did you create this?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I go back to what I would tell you the root problem that we're solving is it's isolation. So if you look at entrepreneurs, particularly men in general, what happens is as you continue to grow your business, increase your influence, and you continue to kind of move up that elevator, becoming more and more successful, what we find comes with that is further isolation. The reason that is the friends that you grew up with that maybe potentially still working a 9 to 5, they don't really understand what you're facing. And honestly, they're like, what do you have to complain about, right? You own your own business. I mean, I'm the one that still has to come in and swipe a clock every day. There's only so much that you can share with your team because as a leadership, there needs to be some healthy boundaries there. And if you're married, you can't dump everything on your spouse. And if she's not business focused or is not also an entrepreneur, there might also be some disconnection and really trying to understand what you're struggling with. So this is the process that I found that occurs. The higher the leader goes up, the more he begins to isolate, particularly as a man. And in that isolation, everything continues to grow more. There's more stress, there's more pressure, there's more at stake. Well, now you run a podcast and you've got a ton of followers, or now you're becoming an influencer, or maybe you got 50 to 100 employees that they're looking to you on top of the fact that you're also responsible for all their families. Like it just keeps building and building as you grow the empire. And so in that isolation, when that stress hits, when you don't have anyone to really talk about the hard stuff with, what I find is entrepreneurs then tend to fundamentally medicate. I see a handful of things that are really repetitive. Entrepreneurs kind of tend to be predictable in how they medicate. It's usually drugs and alcohol. It's usually sex, porn addiction, or it kind of gets into life experience, kind of spending money, gambling, that type of stuff as well. Well, the problem is you're isolated. You now have this reputation of being successful. You're sitting over in shame at this point. You don't have anyone you can talk to about it. And you're afraid that, if it comes out, you're going to lose everything that you built. It took you 20 years to build. And so what I find is they kind of put on a mask for about as long as they can and walk around like everything's okay. Brett, you and I know that we've met a lot of these guys. I mean, go to most mastermind conferences. It's amazing how great everybody's business is doing and how everyone's family is so perfect. And we just got back from the idea. I mean, it's such BS.
Yeah.
Like everyone in that room is in so much pain and everyone is walking around with really 1 or 2 major issues that they're dealing with. but we don't create an environment as men to really be vulnerable. We're kind of chest beating type guys, ego driven. And so when we walk into certain rooms, what those rooms tend to do is they advocate the idea that we're measuring ourselves simply by how much revenue we make, how much net profit, like how big our business is and so forth. And so if that's the true measure of a man within that type of setting, then I don't feel comfortable to even think about dropping my pants and talk about what's going on. So with the entrepreneur, at some point that mask breaks and everything comes out. Let's say it's an adulterous relationship, and then all of a sudden everybody knows. And what I have found is I've seen guys literally within, a week to 2 weeks of everything coming out, they lose their reputation. They start to lose their net worth. They start to lose really the legacy that they were. I mean, it costs them everything. And there's a statistic that shows that 2 out of every 3 leaders will actually fail to finish the race. I'm not okay with that statistic. If we're going back to the fact that leadership changes the world, if we're going back to the concept of social entrepreneurship, that if you put the right person in place that has profit and purpose, and they're solving problems that exist in the world that the government's not going to solve, that is an incredible thing if it's working. But if every 2 out of 3 of these men are getting disqualified either because of a moral misstep or because they burn themselves out, then I sit back and I go, how many problems in the world are not being solved simply because men don't have a safe environment to come in to connect with other entrepreneurs that understand what they're dealing with and have a place that they feel safe, that can be vulnerable and get the help they need before the entire empire they built implodes.
Yeah.
And so that's why for us, if you ask, there's a massive ROI on that. We know leaders by nature, the amount of people that leaders influence, it's a 10x return in my opinion. And if you're dealing specifically with leaders that come in with a heart to use business to impact the world, if we can help those guys, get across the finish line, more of them, I think that you'll see more problems solved in the world, a lot of the problems that exist. And so that is really the driving force behind it. And to answer specifically men, what I have found is a couple things. Women tend to be much better at the vulnerability piece than us as men. We kind of grow up in a man box. And if we step out of that man box, we're punished. We're told things like, stop being a wimp, don't be a girl. We use, all types of, homophobic and misogynistic language when a guy kind of steps out and starts to be emotional, right? It's like, don't cry, don't show your emotion. So we focus on men because it's much more difficult for them to be vulnerable. And secondly, we focus on men because honestly, if you're in a room and it's men only, they will go to some dark places that they will not if there's women in the room. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
It's really hard for a guy to talk about a sexual addiction with a female in the room. And I believe equally that women need these same types of rooms, particularly female entrepreneurs. There's their own set of things that they have. But for us, and obviously I'm a male, this is what we feel like we're called to do, is to focus on men.
Yeah, definitely. It is crazy because my wife, she does these girls trips every year, gets together with the girlfriends and they open up and things like that. And I started doing a guys trip last year, but I hadn't done a guys trip like that in a decade. And a lot of the guys that went with me, they haven't done one in a really, really long time. So it's so interesting that guys, they don't step out and do these things. And that's what's so amazing with the Multipliers Mastermind group. You've created this environment that guys can come and open up, especially entrepreneurs, because again, when you look at your friends, we're always the guys that no one understands. You go to the birthday party, people ask, hey, what do you do? And what are you up to? And like, you just kind of awkwardly say, whatever, flipping houses. And it's just kind of an awkward thing because nobody quite understands, who you are and where you're coming from. And you've talked about this a little bit already, and I don't want to get too deep into the group or anything like that, but obviously a lot of your friends and the people in this group and just people that you surround yourself with are high-powered driven men. And you've mentioned a couple already, but what are some of the common weaknesses or the common things that, a business owner faces, right? You mentioned isolation, and I think community obviously is huge, which you've created that, but is there any other things that, you can talk about? Like what are we faced with?
I can tell you the major thing is they don't feel. Bottom line. So if you're dealing with men in general, and again, if you kind of look at the root word of feel, it means to touch. And I would define feeling as allowing yourself to be touched and changed by the circumstances in your lives. That's what feeling is, bottom line. Well, if you have a lot of men that have been taught to suppress emotion and feeling, what that means is as circumstances and tragedy and crisis and whatever is coming down their lives, they're doing everything to keep that at bay and not to actually feel or be touched by that. The problem is you get a stoic man at the end. And I love what Kevin Wheeler, Kevin, he's been a mentor to us and a part of Multipliers brother. He's like, it's like holding a beach ball underwater. I mean, you can do it for a while, but at some point it's going to pop up. And so what we really try to focus on with men is to get them to begin to understand the value of what it means to feel. And if you don't think that's important, go around and talk to the spouse and the kids of an entrepreneur that is just feeling like lacks any feelings whatsoever. Yeah. Like I'm telling you that those kids don't feel love. That wife doesn't feel love. And so there's a major cost that's happening with men. I mean, even as a leader, if you're an emotionless leader that is so task oriented, so business oriented, that you really show no sense of personal vulnerability, or you don't have the ability to be empathetic and emotionally connect with the people that you lead, I'm sorry, you're not going to lead for long. I mean, you might lead for long, but you're just going to have massive turnover. You'll never build a long-standing team. So I would tell you one of the main things and one of the biggest challenges we see is we try to really get men to value emotion and to embrace how important it is to feel, because we've been raised to really not trust feelings and to think that there's really any value in them. Yeah. It's like we do everything we can to bypass, suppress emotion because we think it's just something that's going to get in our way. Like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to feel for that. Right. And you just keep hard charging forward. And man, that's going to come at a major cost for you at some point.
Yeah, it's funny how men, we're always just trying to hold back, right? Like the older I get, and I got kids now, and I start to feel a lot more, even watching a movie sometimes, I'm always trying to hold back my emotions, or if I'm talking to my wife and we're having a really intimate, serious conversation, and I'm always trying to like hold myself back. Don't feel, like don't let it out, right? And it's funny because it seems like we're all trying to numb ourselves. And if we start to go a little bit farther down this emotion, this feeling, we try to do something to numb it, right? And that's where the medication comes in, that maybe the alcohol, the drugs, workaholicism or whatever, we've all struggled with that. We're just trying to numb and get control. Would you agree with that, Chris?
Absolutely. 100%. And that's why you see a lot of the common behaviors that are coming out. And here's the reality, facing shame, particularly, again, a lot of this times we make mistakes as men. Men tend to have some dark secrets. I think we've all done some things that we're, not proud of. And so, having to actually face that shame is a very difficult journey. Like, that is painful. But a leader that's not willing to really look deeply at his stuff is just not going to last for long. And I don't think that men will face shame on their own. Only when they find themselves in a community and they begin to realize that, oh, like, I'm not the only one that struggles with this. You mean like everyone else here for the most part is pretty effed up? When there comes that commonality of understanding, like, it's not just me. And I mean, this is true with anything that struggles in the world, whether it's people that have particular health issues or different things that are wrong. There's always that sense of isolation. Like, I'm the only one in the world struggling with this. But what we find time and again is when you put people together that have a common struggle. And all of a sudden you remove this idea that I'm the only one, there's something wrong with me, nobody else deals with this. There becomes a lot of power in that healing, because it's like, it's okay that I talk about these things, because it's not just me, it's all these other guys that feel the same way. And that's when the floodgates open. And, you know, you've been to our events. I mean, it happens the same way every year. There's always two things that I observe. Number one, all it does is it takes for the first guy to go first and go open kimono. Mm-hmm. The first guy that's willing to drop in his heart, drop that bomb of whatever, you know, he's going through, whether it be a divorce or something that's happened. I mean, you see what happens in the men that are around that, because that is a level of courage that is far greater than the courage that it takes to do a big business deal or to buy a company. Like, we stand in awe of people that are willing to be public vulnerably. Yeah. And all of a sudden from there, that person leads the group. They've set the tone. And I'm telling you, you sit back and then the next guy grabs the mic and then boom, he's in tears. And then the next, and it just all starts coming out. And I have been really fascinated by a concept we have in Multipliers every year. We do what's called a MVP award, right? Your most valuable player. Mm-hmm. And it's voted on not by us as staff, but it's actually voted on by everyone that's at the event in the community. So literally, we just pass out a piece of paper, we put a bowl up front, and we just simply say, we put no standard on it. We just say, whoever you think was the most valuable player this year, write their name. We don't say how that person was valuable. We don't pigeonhole it. All we say is who's most valuable. Every single year, the person that wins was the person that went first and had, really honestly, the balls to be the most courageous, to go first and to talk about something extremely difficult every year. Yeah. So that allows you to understand by nature what entrepreneurs really value. I've never seen someone win that award because they came in and had the greatest business idea, or, you know, they came in and crushed it because they're the highest performer in that group and they're doing 2 times the amount. That person never wins. Mm-hmm. The person that always wins was the guy that had the courage to be vulnerable. Because here's what we understand about courage. And Brené Brown really says this. We love the vulnerability that we see in others when they take the time to do it. The problem is we hate the vulnerability when we see in ourselves. And it's a really difficult dichotomy that you have to wrestle with, of why am I so encouraged and inspired by someone that shared vulnerability, but when it comes to me and I share, I get this feeling of shame and it's not the same. And you really have to bypass that misconception about how you feel about expressing your own vulnerability. That's what keeps people from moving forward with it.
Yeah, definitely. Vulnerability, and it's huge. And you've created such an environment for that, Chris. So just applaud you on that, man. So keep up the great work on that. I just have a couple other questions here before we go in the last section of the show, Chris. I guess I just want to talk about you. And we talk in business all the time, a BHAG. It's called the Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. And this is like a goal that's set out in front of you. You can't quite see it yet, but it's 10 to 30 years down the road. And we talk about this is where we want our business to be at 10 to 30 years down the road. And I want to talk about life, right? And sometimes we have these business big goals, but we don't sit there and look at our life. So, you know, I was talking to you before the show, is just your BHAG in your life. So if you could picture your life 30 years from now, you know, you'd be 70 years old, 70 something. And so picture your life and just looking back over the last many, many years. And what is like a goal, like a big thing that you want to accomplish, that you want to look back at your life and you're like, wow, this was amazing. I lived an amazing life. Talk about that.
I would say it's twofold. The first one, I really do believe this is a big, hairy, audacious goal because it doesn't happen. I honestly want to look back at age 70 and just know that I walked a consistent walk. If you look at someone like Billy Graham, you know, Mother Teresa, there is something that's so powerful about the moral authority that they build because when you look upon their life overall, they're for the most part blameless. They never really stepped into something, not that they didn't make mistakes, but really cost them everything. And I happen to have grown up with a really great father that, for me, modeled integrity and character at a consistent level that I still, to this day, I don't think I've really ever seen in a lot of other men. And honestly, for me, when it comes to, being married and, at some point having kids and all those type of things, my initial internal big, hairy, audacious goal was the fact that people looked at my life and said, that guy walked the walk. He just walked the walk. He didn't veer off into right field. He didn't do something that, literally cost him his reputation that he's going to have to carry with his life. I really hope to be that guy that, led by example and led well. And I really believe that's a big, hairy, audacious goal, because I don't think that most people get there. And honestly, that goal is also under my greatest fear. And if you were asking me what my greatest fear is based upon my background, which I tend to be excessive and impulsive, is that I'm just going to be another statistic, that I'm going to, at some point, make a decision that costs me everything that I've built. And I'm going to lose the respect and the platform that I've earned. At the top of the show, you said, hey, Chris, I've gotten to know you and I admire you. I hear that. But my greatest fear is that I would do some behavioral decision that would cost me that. Yeah. So part of my big, hairy, audacious goal, I think, is also driven by one of my greatest fears, and that I do something that costs me everything. Second to that, in the sense of just as a whole, for me, it's about impacting as many people's lives through business as possible. I wish I could tell you, like, we just bought our first company. I was talking with my COO the other day. I don't think I'll ever launch a company again from scratch. I think we will continue to do roll-up acquisition and continue to grow. But honestly, if I look at a couple people that really model for me, like my BHAG, someone like that would be like Blake McCoskey with Tom's Shoes, right? Blake McCoskey comes in, sees a massive global problem. Kids can't go to school because they don't have shoes. And he comes in and he takes that business and he builds it to an unbelievable level. And if you know anything about his story and what he's done, it was cool to see that by the time he began to get to the end of that business before he sold it, his position was chief shoe giver. So fundamentally, like, he was just going on the trips in which they were giving shoes to kids. And so for me, my big, hairy, audacious goal is to really continue to roll up acquisition to a place of building a really substantial amount of wealth. And again, how much is that? It's an easy question for me to answer. The amount is whatever God needs me to have in order to do what he's called me to do. That's my number. I don't know how much that is. I don't know if that's, 25 million. I don't know if that's $1 billion. I don't know, but I really do have this desire and heart to get to a place to where we are utilizing that level of funds. And I want to solve a major global problem via business. And at 41, I don't know what it is yet. And you and I were talking at the top of the hour. One of the reasons that I want to spend a lot of time traveling around the world, and I'm not talking about going to France and, Italy, but really, I want to expose myself to some of the problems that exist in the world that I'm not going to see or find sitting at my desk. Yeah. I just not. And so my big, hairy, audacious goal is to build a massive company that ends up days solving some great global problem, just like Blake McCoskey did with Tom's Shoes.
That's amazing. That's awesome. And before the show, you did talk about that traveling. So one of your passions is traveling. I love seeing different cultures, just getting out of America, seeing how other people live. I just got back from Guatemala a couple weeks ago, and just always fascinates me by how people live in some of these other countries, especially third world types of countries. But you're getting ready to meet with an extreme group of travelers, and these people have traveled to every country. So talk to us about that a little bit. Like, this is also a passion of yours as well, but it also has a mission behind it. But so talk to us about that.
Yeah. I'm at a place where it's funny. You asked BHAG, right? Big, hairy, audacious goal. I'm 41 now, and I'm like, I've got this new decade of being in my 40s. Like, what I want to do by the time that I'm 50. And I'm not a like, I'm a guy that needs like massive variety. I've never really had a hobby. I can play any sport. If you watch me week to week, one day I'm mountain biking, one day I'm paddleboarding, next day I'm playing pickleball. Like, I really have a problem doing repetition. It just doesn't work for me, which has always really made it difficult for me to pour myself into something outside of business as just being one thing. Now, I pour myself into a lot of different things. I can do just about any sport, but I've been really looking for like that one thing. And so I feel like with travel, it provides the variety that I need, but it also sets me on a course for really focusing potentially on one goal, kind of one focus, one hobby. And I just happened to be watching this documentary on HBO, and I saw this guy named Harry. He's a world traveler out of London, and he's traveled every country in the world, and he's 7 countries away from doing it twice. So let's put some math on this. That will make him the 4th person, dead or alive, to ever travel to every country in the world. If you go to the fact of how many people have actually traveled to all 193 countries just once, that's 222 people, dead or alive. To put that into perspective, that's less people than have been into space. So I've gotten to know Harry, and I'm flying out to some random island off the coast of the Congo in September because I want to really size up this opportunity, because it's this elite kind of extreme travelers. In that group of 25, 9 have been to every country in the world, which is amazing considering there's only been 222. So I'm going to meet 9 in one place. And since we're talking about BHAGs, I'm potentially sizing that up and looking at potentially making that a goal to go do that. So actually, I haven't said that publicly. Yeah, I just happened to be on a podcast. The one caveat for me is that these tend to be very solo travelers. There's about 80 countries I've been told that people will go with you and like as a friend. But when you start getting into certain countries, you're going to have a lot of friends go, no, I'm not going to that country with you. And because I am so social by nature, one of the reasons I'm taking this trip is to understand how well I would deal with the loneliness of traveling at that level.
Yeah.
But that's what it would take to get there. It would push my personality probably to a place that it hadn't been before. I can handle crisis. The faster the pitch is, like I do really, really well in crisis. But if you really want to challenge me, just put me in isolation by myself, because I'm so highly social. Like for me, that's torture.
Yeah.
Like if I had to go to prison and be put in like solitary confinement, like I wouldn't last 2 weeks. Like I'd know that about myself. And again, I think there's a way to work around that system. Again, I'll meet people, different things. So we're going to take a look at the system and see if we want to put a team together within my company to do that. But again, my goal in doing that would not only to be have something to pour myself into outside of business, but secondly, that would be the way for me to go discover maybe what global problem it is that we want to solve. So it kind of all goes hand in hand. Like you're catching me at a time where like I'm starting to maybe see some of these dots connect for me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I'm right. Like you just happen to have me publicly sharing something that I haven't really fully come to fruition yet, but it's like things are starting to align for me around that.
Well, just thanks for opening up about that. Again, it's just all about opening up and just some of that vulnerability. And I really admire that we don't all have it all figured out, right? And you're exploring some of these different things that you haven't done yet. And maybe you will do that, maybe you won't. But God's bringing you to a place. And I think we're always trying to see, what He's called us to. And we never quite make it, right? I mean, we never quite arrive at this place where like, oh my gosh, I have it all together, all figured out. It's always a journey. Wouldn't you agree?
100%.
Yeah, sounds good.
It's like headlights on a car. You go as far as you can see, and then you can see just a little bit further.
Yeah.
And then it's rinse, repeat that model again and again.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Chris. Guys, if you're tuning in, this is Chris Arnold. Make sure you check out Chris's platform, Wholesaling Inc., and the Multipliers Brotherhood. Check that out as well. Chris, I always like to end every show with a little fun. This is called the People Game. I don't know why I called it that. It's called the People Game because you're a people person. And I got 4 questions for you. These are super short answers, so just name the first thing that comes to your mind. And all of these answers are about people, right? It's about a person that, whatever these answers are. So number 1, who is your favorite author? Who's the person that's your favorite author?
Andy Stanley.
Cool. I love Andy Stanley.
Yeah, Andy Stanley out of Atlanta. My favorite.
Sounds good.
And speaker / author, because he's also an unbelievable speaker. Yeah,
definitely. All right, number 2, who has made the biggest impact on your life?
Without question, my dad. Not even a close second. So he's been a huge impact in my life and my brother's lives. So won the lottery. And it's crazy. You don't control the family that you're born into. A lot of people listening, might not have had fathers or tough fathers. That was the one thing in my life where, man, I felt really blessed to just happen to be born into a family which I was given a great father, which is priceless. It's absolutely priceless.
Definitely. All right, number 3, whose life do you really admire?
I talked about Blake McCoskey, but I'll go back to, honestly, I've read and watched a lot on Billy Graham. If you don't know who Billy Graham was, he was an evangelist, but I just am amazed at the level of integrity that guy walked. Like, there's very, very few people that create that level of moral authority in their life. Like, he didn't trip. He didn't fall. He didn't do something. And that's just such a rarity. And so I've got a lot of respect for Billy Graham.
No, amazing. All right, last one. Today, who would you like to have a coffee with? Is there a person that you'd like to have coffee with today? If you could have coffee with anybody.
Yeah. If I could have coffee with anyone, that's a great question. I tend to be pretty fascinated right now with Elon Musk. I think most of us are. I think that guy lives in a cerebral world. He thinks at a level that I think is just incomprehensible to most of us. So I'm truly fascinated by Elon Musk because very few people have a vision at that level. And so, man, I'd love to sit down with Elon. Again, I'd probably have to record it and go back and listen to it because I don't know if you've ever seen him do interviews. He really has to dumb down the language, just because of the way in which his brain is at. But that guy just floors me. That guy, to build $1 billion company, unbelievable. Most people will never get there. To build already 3 by his, early 40s, whatever he is now, 44, 45. It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
Mind blowing. How do you do that?
No, it's crazy. That's awesome. Now that would be amazing. Well, if you ever do that, please record it. I'd like to see a copy.
Sure you would.
Now, sounds good. Well, thanks so much. This is Chris Arnold, guys. Thanks, Chris, so much for being on the Brett Snodgrass podcast today. Really appreciate you, man. Wish you the best. Multipliers Group, Wholesaling Inc. Thanks, Chris, man. Awesome
Appreciate
stuff.
it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for checking out the Brett Snodgrass channel. If you like this video, please slam on that like button. And if you really like it, then subscribe to our channel here. And remember to leave us a comment below, and I'm going to try my hardest to reply to all the comments. Thank you guys so much. This is why I do what I do. Every single week, I come out with content that focuses on success, freedom, and living out your purpose. Thank you guys so much. See you next time.